I am so happy to be the first to introduce you to my new coloring book, Flowerscape in Paradise. So starting off with the cover, you'll notice that I stuck to the same format as my last book, but this time we're leaning into a more tropical color scheme with a preview of some of the flora and fauna that you'll find inside. In terms of the book construction, it's 8 by 9 inches, it's 96 pages long, and it has thick 160 GSM smooth white paper, so it's the exact same print technique and quality as the last book. It has a sewn binding and it's lay flat, so it stays open really nicely while you're working on the inside. I'll do a separate video that shows examples of different mediums and how they perform on the paper, but as an overview, this book is best for colored pencils and markers. I have used watercolor markers with a lot of success. It's not a watercolor book though, so I wouldn't advise doing a wet on wet technique. But the good news is it can handle several layers of marker without bleed through. The paper is absolutely thick and high quality. Anyway, let's dive in and take a look at what is inside Flowerscape in Paradise. So first up is the nameplate page. This one features tropical leaves, freesia and alpinia, as well as this butterfly. And next is the introduction. On this page, I included a few of the flowers found elsewhere in the book. I especially love these bamboo. I think they create such a lovely frame. Next up is flower identification. So this is probably the most exciting feature of Flowerscape in Paradise. With so many different flowers throughout the book, I wanted to create a really clean, easy way to identify them and have references for what colors you might want to use. So I'll show you how this works in practice on the next page. But if you don't feel like messing with QR codes, you can also just go to colorflowerscape.com/paradise, where you can find color references for every flower in the book without having to scan each page individually. This page is Torch, Ginger, and Clivia, and it's the very first page I drew when I was pitching the idea for Flowerscape in Paradise, so it seemed fitting for me to include it as the first full composition. I can just imagine the gorgeous, vibrant oranges and reds. And speaking of color, let me show you how to use the QR code function. So in order to use it, you open up the camera app on your smartphone and you hover it over the QR code on any page that you're working on. It'll take you to a link to click, and you'll go to a website where you can see color references for the exact flowers shown on that page. Next up is my kiwi blossom page. So this is kiwi blossoms and porcelain flowers, and this one includes rainbow lorikeets. I saw tons of them when I was traveling and briefly living in Australia, so I just had to include them in the book. I included kiwi slices as well, and full kiwi fruits. You can also see that I play with some frame ideas in this book. And if you scan the QR code, I've also listed the animals. So if you ever don't know what anything is, that's where you can find that info as well. So this next page is Anthurium and Blue Star Fern. I just love this one. I was inspired by postage stamp borders. So you can see here that there's this stamped shape, and there's a center rectangle and then two partials on the top and bottom. I'm really proud of this one because I actually own this plant, and even though I drew this last summer, it's still alive. I didn't kill it. So this is Protea and Plumeria. I feel like I shouldn't be allowed to say I love this one for every page, but I really do. I love the idea of the vase. You could make it patterned clay. You could also make it glass, and you could play with transparency if you're feeling sort of ambitious. But I do really like how this page is more simple and more approachable. So this page is Kaleidoscope Orchid and Pentas. This is another one where I was playing with frames. So I really thought of this as my star page because the orchids look like 5-pointed stars, and then you have the little star-shaped pentas. And of course I had to make a star border. I can really see this being a dark and nighttime sky background. This is Waxflower and Pegonia with this super adorable Capuchin monkey. At this point, I'm sure you're noticing a difference between my first book and Flowerscape in Paradise, and that's that all of the compositions are on the right-hand side of the book, and I'm labeling all of the flowers in each design now, so it's not just one per page. I really like the spacing of this piece, and I like how there are some big areas of negative space. It feels like there is a lot of potential to play around with this page. Passion flower. I have been obsessed with passion flowers for a few months now. I actually special ordered some that are being grown for me right now, and they're gonna be shipped to me in April because I just think they're so incredible and I really wanna fill my home with them. Anyway, I digress. This composition is a little more loose and flowy, and I like that there are passion flowers and then the whole fruits. Gloxinia and bleeding heart vines. Bleeding heart vines are just so cool. I think they're one of the main reasons I wanted to go for a tropical theme because I just wanted an excuse to draw them. So this page has a fun geometric border and these big statement leaves. It's got some really interesting textures happening. Oh, and also Gloxinia, if you look it up, it's just so saturated in the middle, and then as the petals move outward, they become lighter. Oh, it's just gorgeous. So Zanqua, Wattle, Blue Plumbago, Camellia. This one I designed specifically for fans of the mixed flower spreads in book number 1. So they're kind of my showstopper pages. They're really packed to the brim, and there's a lot of different elements and color to play around with. This is honeysuckle and tea plant. For this one, I did a pretty shell vase. I was also thinking that it kind of had an underwater coral seaweed bouquet kind of vibe. So there's a lot of potential for direction that you might want to go into. So you could do it a little bit more on land, or you could really embrace the kind of sea feeling of it. Oh, my sea turtle. So this one I drew inspired by my friend Taylor. She's a marine biologist, and she's the friend I was living with in Australia. And a lot of this book is inspired by my love for her and the adventures we go on together. So this glorious sea turtle was inspired by a day we spent in Exmouth, Australia, watching baby sea turtles hatch and find their way to the ocean. I seriously can't believe that I have been able to do that in my life. It's unreal. So this shell I drew for her wedding invitation, and I repurposed it. The lobster claws, which are these ones around the side, those are because honestly, nobody loves lobster more than this girl. Her wedding was in Maine last year, and it was like a lobster themed wedding. And I did Queen's wreath as well because she's my queen. Anyway, you'll see that this page has a lot of frames within frames. So the outer lobster claw frame, and then these 4 leafy corners that match, and then these 2 rows here and the center oval. There's just a lot of fun stuff going on. Oh, these are scarlet stars. So this was actually the second page that I drew for the book, and I drew it for my husband, Adam, who really loves plants and specifically is a sucker for hanging baskets. It's really simple, but I think the details of the rope should make it fun. And when I showed him the initial manuscript for the book, he said, you know, he was like, oh, there are so many great pages. I don't know why, but I like those hanging baskets. And I said, well, I know why. It's because I made it for you. This seahorse page is so fun. Lots and lots of textured details. I also hid some seaweed in here. I just couldn't resist. I love seahorses. I've loved them since I visited them at the Shedd Aquarium in Chicago when I was in college. I drew seahorses a lot in college, which is probably just like a rite of passage for any illustrator. So these here are also just made up flowers that they echoed the shape of the rock trumpet. So I really liked that. And the wax flowers kind of continue that same shape. So you can see that I'm hitting on a little bit of a star theme again. This is African iris. I actually forgot about this one. I found these flowers in a parking lot on Coronado Island last June, kind of just this little dirt patch. It was very unglamorous. But I love seeing something so small and simple and then glamorizing it, making it the star of the show. So this page was inspired by Coronado Island and the architecture and our view of the bridge and how warm and beautiful it was and how the air smelled like ocean. It just takes me back to summertime. This is my begonia ball. I just really wanted to do leaves, but since it is called Flowerscape, I included some blossoms as well. I couldn't not. This is one of those pages that as I was drawing it, I was thinking, oh wow, I just can't wait to see how everybody colors this in. I can imagine just an explosion of layered greens and pinks. Love it. Okay, flannel flower and warata. This is another page inspired by my time in Australia. This is a 4-way reflected piece. So it's another frame inside a frame design, and it's inspired by the idea of a woven tapestry. I think this one is gonna be really fun to color. And I have to get used to saying frame in frame because I'll be saying that a few more times. This is Rosy Periwinkle. I really like this page. Now listen, this chameleon is not for the faint of heart, but the reason I drew it with so much detail is because I really felt like it should have that scaly look even in its most basic form. So if I were to color this, I would probably use a white gel pen at the end to lightly tap and pop on each one of the tiny scales, which sounds pretty fun to me and would really kind of bring them up. This is Metanilla and Hydrangea. So this page is all about texture. There's a lot to play with. This is another page inspired by the spreads in the first book that are a little more dense and complex, but this one is more approachable because even though there's tons of detail, it's just the single right-hand page. Beehive Ginger. Oh, I actually forgot until right this minute that I added hibiscus to this. So that was kind of a last minute decision, but if you look up Beehive Ginger, you'll see that they have just the most amazing gradients. There's a lot of color potential in that. Citronella and Aloe. So I will say, I may have gone a little overboard on this page. I was inspired by colorful ceramic tiles. So these tiles here represent the sun, and these ones represent the aloe plant. And I just really liked the idea of having something to like work on with really sharp pencils and fine liner pens. So I understand this one is pretty detailed, but you can always go from a super detailed page to one that's a bit airier with larger details like this one. So this is my starfish page. And if you haven't guessed by now, I just really am leaning into my love of star shapes in this book. And you'll notice again some shapes that echoes each other. So the center of these mile-a-minute vines, they kind of echo the star shape. What can I say? I love a theme. Ooh, I've been waiting for this page. So of course I had to showcase the bird of paradise. I illustrated this rug shape with these tasseled corners, and this is probably gonna be the page I start on myself. The borders could be really vibrant, or you could do something more black and white around the edges and then just have a super colorful center. This one really, really inspires me. Flamingos. Details, details, details. I have this spray of orchids, and then there are these 3 distinct layers. So it's orchids, and then banana leaves, and then these big blue lilies. So depending on what palette you choose, you could create a really pretty gradient as you color each layer. Golden chalice vine. So these are really big saturated golden blooms, and I wanted to create something with tons of different layered shapes to color. So the flowers I've utilized here all have warm sunset tones, which I loved to imagine together. And this is a super detailed page, but I love how many varied shapes there are. So there are circles, stars, varied sprays of things. There's just a lot of different shapes. Ooh, my little pitcher plant in privet frame. This geometric border plays off the shape of privet. And if you haven't seen pitcher plants before, they are super cool carnivorous plants. And I've layered them here so all of the pitcher plants are hanging from the top of the frame, and then the privet is coming up from the bottom. Oh, okay. This is my tropical farmers market inspired page. It's got these fun separated borders. They're little vignettes that include different fruits and blossoms. This is also inspired by postage stamps, and it's very tempting to me. It's one of those pages that I would start by filling in the background colors for each one, and then I would probably dive into the leaves and try to make sure everything was a little bit different tones for each different fruit and blossom that is featured. Aeonium. So this comes in a few different colors, but the ones I like the most are these super dark purplish red ones. They're this really deep crimson color, it's almost a gradient that goes to black. And I would say this is kind of a grown-up version of the succulent page from my last book, which was much more intimidating because it was a 2-page spread, and this time I've contained it within this hexagon shape with this twisted rope frame. Oh, this is so fun to go through because I keep forgetting about some pages. This is my wallpaper themed tiki bar vibe page. So what's fun is that I built this out in 3 vertical strips that are sort of flipped and repeated, just like a wallpaper or a pattern design. And then these little frogs are marching up the center. Each one has a different spot pattern. So this one does go edge to edge because I thought that it was really important for it to go edge to edge to have that true wallpaper themed feel. Another vase. So instead of bouquets for this book, I really enjoyed creating pattern vases. I actually drew 3 or 4 more that I didn't manage to fit in the book. It was really fun drawing the different designs, and I really love Blue Tango. It's got this amazing hot pink and royal blue color. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. It feels unreal. Oh yay, pomegranates. This is another theme that I've been fixated on lately. I've been really obsessed with pomegranates for some reason. And I love that within the tropical theme, I could draw so many fruits and their blossoms. So this one is the only one that's burst open, but you can find little scattered pomegranate seeds throughout, sort of hidden in here. And the border here echoes the pomegranate blossom shape. This page is pretty intense, but I like it. This page is for my family. So this is inspired by Oahu in Hawaii, where both sides of my family lived and, well, still live. It's where both my parents grew up. And I was lucky to get to spend so much of my childhood in Hawaii and visiting my grandparents. My grandma made traditional Hawaiian quilts and my grandpa was a woodworker. So this just reminds me of visiting them. And this hibiscus and these plumeria are from my last visit there. I stayed with my uncle for a few days in Kaneohe, and this is for them. This to me is very Flowerscape in Paradise, just lush, dense, tropical flowers. Okay, so this page is all about scent and citrus, and I drew it based on this lime tree that we had down the street from our apartment on the beach in Australia. So I love how organic the shape is across the page. If you liked the rose spread from my first book, this one was kind of based on the flow of that one. And I personally love coloring citrus, so I really wanted a few of those in the book. Oh, I forgot about my pineapple page too. So this one reminds me of my dad, who constantly reminds me that he worked at the Dole Pineapple Factory in Hawaii. He says it a lot. Every time. He's like, oh, you know, I worked at Dole. And I'm like, yeah, I know. You tell me all the time. You cut pineapples there and they stung your arms. Anyway, he's told me a million times, and it's just kind of a fun, celebratory little pineapple drawing that proves I've been paying attention. So we are getting into a few animal pages here. This is my gecko page. And it's really important to me because my grandma Alice in Hawaii taught me when I was little how lucky it was to have a gecko in your house, which for a child that is fairly afraid of things like bugs and animals, was somehow geckos just made the cut and were no longer scary once I knew they were good luck. So I love this oval frame, and everything inside of it is really packed and close together. And the heliconia is supposed to kind of play on the shapes of the little gecko feet. So that's kind of fun. Oh, my toucans. So this was the 3rd page I drew for the book. So when you, or I don't know if this is like how it normally works, but when you pitch an idea for a book, you're supposed to have a few example pages drawn. And for me, the 3 that I submitted were the torch ginger from the 1st page and the hanging baskets that I drew for my husband, and then this toucan page. So they were the jumping off point for the whole book. This is the first pattern frame that I drew, and I just wanted to have lots of frame shapes and patterns and options in the book. And to me, it kind of feels classically tropical. It feels sort of like a painting. Koi fish. So this one is based on another one of my drawings of koi fish, and I reimagined it for this coloring book with the addition of these gorgeous water lily flowers and lotus. This exact water lily I saw on a trip I took when my husband proposed to me 7 years ago. So you can imagine what it's like to travel with me. I'm constantly photographing flowers and sketching them, and I'm sure it's quite annoying, but how wonderful is it to get to revisit something years later and make art out of it? It's like creating a little scrapbook of illustrated memories. So this fuchsia is from my own garden, and if you follow me on Instagram, you do see a fair amount of fuchsia updates. I love them. And this piece is also reimagined from a drawing I did of my own fuchsia. So these ones are called Voodoo Fuchsia, and they are so vibrant. The pink and purple feel like you can't, like it feels like they should not be able to exist in nature. It's just too bright, and it's the most glorious thing you've ever seen in your life. If you can't tell, they're one of my favorite flowers. This pincushion protea drawing is all about lines and bursts. So I've paired them with these fan palms, and they burst up from the bottom of the page like an explosion of flowers. And pincushion proteas are hard to draw, but I wanted to include them, so I increased the size of their detail a little bit to make them a little bit more accessible for coloring. This is another tile-inspired page, and it includes a lot of fragrant flowers, and it's all about scent. And this one has a very, very, very special meaning to me. So this rose is the only rose that appears in the book, and it's an ode to my friend Ade, who passed away just over a year ago. He's the one who designed the Flowerscape logo, and he was an incredible artist. And I designed a rose tattoo for him that he got before he died. Roses were kind of his thing. So this book probably would have had a more creative name, but for me, it was non-negotiable. I wanted to include his work on the book, and these roses are for him. And anyway, I'm getting a little sad, but the design I think would be really fun to color to make them look like ceramic tiles. So maybe some beveled shading would look really nice on that. So this is my fire-inspired page. It's got flame lilies and Maui red, which is this bright red cluster of flowers. Pretty saturated, and really to me just looks like flames and fire. This is a tapestry inspired page. So these strips have repeating pattern elements, and it reminds me of weavings and tattoos. The details are a bit larger, so this would be good for a lot of different mediums, and it would likely also be a good page to start on if you are new to coloring. So this is my trumpet vine page, but I think the orchids are actually the star of the show. And of course I had to sneak in a few more butterflies. This one is pretty approachable. It doesn't really have any micro details. This one could also be a great starting point if you're not the type of person who goes chronologically. I would suggest one of those two pages. I also think the Bird of Paradise is a really nice starting page. And here we are, the last true spread in the book. This is oleander and flowering maple. So flowering maple is a new one for me. They look like little lanterns. So this was kind of my end of book, full moon, sunset, and lantern inspired page. It's a little goodbye filled with fragrant night blossoms and lots of different swooping lines. Lastly, we have the about and special thanks with skyvine flowers on the edges. And then we have a little extra blank at the back of the book to test colors of different mediums. I always appreciate when there's some space to try out a few swoops and swashes. So there you have it, Flowerscape in Paradise. It is an ode to all things tropical. It comes out in North America on March 21st, 2023, and it will be available worldwide over the next couple months. I've placed links to purchase in the show notes, and I will continue to update them as it becomes available in different places. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. You can follow me on Instagram at Little Patterns, and the book has its own Instagram page that's at Color Flowerscape. And that's where you can share color pages and see examples of different techniques, and you can connect with me about all things Flowerscape. Thank you for watching. I can't wait to hear what you think. Bye.